Hi everyone, it's Dr. Melissa Corso here. I'm a sports specialist chiropractor, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the Athlete's Guide to Recovery. So by the end of this presentation, a few things you should be able to take away is what recovery means, why recovery is important, the consequences when you don't get enough recovery, and then the main thing here to take away are different ways you can help yourself recover after practices, after games, and throughout your season. So to start off, what is recovery? There are kind of two main definitions that can apply to you. The first is a return to a normal state of health, mind, or strength. As an athlete, as a soccer player, you can take all three of these things, and they're all really important. So your general health, your mental state, so looking at physical stressors and mental stressors, as well as your strength or your performance. The second part of the definition is the action or process of regaining possession or control of something that is stolen or lost. And I like this definition because if you think of energy being spent through your training and through your competition, that's something that's lost or something that's used. And recovery is an active process where you can regain some of that energy to be able to maintain your performance. So what are some things that may have an impact on recovery or the amount of recovery you need? This can be the intensity of exercise, so how hard you're working. The harder you work, the more recovery you'll need. The duration of exercise, so how long you're exercising for. If you have a particularly long practice, you might need more recovery. If you have a tournament, you'll need more recovery. If you have a short practice, you maybe need less recovery there. Your current level of fitness. So this will have an impact because the fitter you are, the more endurance or strength you have, the less recovery you'll need for the same practice than if you had a low level of fitness. Okay, and so that's where your training comes in. The harder you train, the harder you work, the stronger you get, the less stress your practices and games are on your body, the less recovery you need. And then your different methods of recovery. If you go about your life and you're not doing anything in particular to improve your recovery after your training and after your games, this will lead to poor recovery, and this will then subsequently affect your performance as you continue through the season. So, what happens when you don't have enough recovery? As I mentioned, the main principle in training is to have a stressor to the body or a stimulus to the body that leads to adaptation. And this adaptation will help increase your fitness and subsequently improve performance. If you have insufficient balance between the load, so the stimulus you're providing your body with, and recovery, it can lead to prolonged fatigue and abnormal training responses, which is called maladaptation. And so what that means is instead of working really hard, recovering, and becoming stronger, you work really hard, you don't recover enough, and the next time you go to exercise, you're not at your optimal level, and over time, this might lead to a breakdown in your body. It might lead to an increased risk of injury or illness. And that's called maladaptation. That means your body isn't adapting the right way. So maladaptations can be caused by a number of different things. They can be caused by poor management of training. So sometimes that's not your fault. Sometimes that might be your schedule. Maybe there's too many training sessions, too many games, too many tournaments in a row, where the physical load is too high and you don't have enough time for recovery in between. And that's your sport-related stress. But maladaptations can also happen with interacting with psychological or non-sport stressors, and this can be negative life events, this can be daily hassles, this could be you have a big test that you feel like you're not ready for, or you have a lot of homework. This could be something personal that's happened, maybe something at home that you're dealing with. So it's really important to remember that recovery is needed for the sport stressors, but also for the non-sport related stressors. It's also important to remember that people vary in terms of what stressors do to their bodies, and so there's variation in how they respond to load. That means there's no one size fits all for training or competition, and it's really important for you to pay attention to your body. And the way you do that is through monitoring external loads, which is the work that you do, the stress that you put on your body. That would be the number of practices, the number of games or tournaments, as well as monitoring your capabilities and capacities. So that's looking at your level of fitness. That's looking at how strong am I? How much endurance do I have? Those types of kind of physical qualities, okay? And then you want to also consider your internal load, and that's how your body responds to the work you do and your level of fitness. So how do you do that? That requires some self-reflection and saying, okay, I just had a practice. How do I feel after that practice? I just had a game. How do I feel after that game? How do I feel in terms of my physical capacity, and how do I feel in terms of my mental capacity, and what type of recovery do I need there? Now, what's important to remember is when you don't have enough recovery, and we'll talk about this on the next few slides with some pictures. After a load, the process of adaptation doesn't happen. So you don't become stronger the next time you have a practice, next time you have a game. You actually might put too much stress on your body, and this might lead to tissue damage. And tissue damage that's small, that you don't know that's happening. It doesn't cause you pain. It's just that over time, this becomes a problem because it's being added on top of each other, again, with inadequate recovery. You're not getting enough recovery over time. And so the pain or the symptoms might not happen right away. It might happen a little bit later. So let's talk about this in a picture. And I know this stuff isn't the most stimulating, but it's really important. So this is what happens when you have adequate recovery, okay? So let's start here. The line right down the middle is called base level. That's your base level of fitness. That's where you are today, okay? That's your capacity. This is what you can do. And if we go across over from left to right, that's time. Now, if we start with the first load here, you can see that in the red, after this load is imposed, you have some reduced capacity. But if you give yourself time to recover, you come back up to the base level, and again, with more and more time, your body adapts properly, you get stronger, okay? Now you're into this green area, and you add another load. Well, after this load is added, you can see in the red dotted line, your capacity is going to reduce. But because you gave yourself enough time to recover, that reduction doesn't bring you back below that base level of fitness. It still keeps you above. And then you allow your body to recover and you increase your capacity even more. So over time, if you allow this to happen, you're slowly going up in that upward direction, always staying above that base level as long as you give your body enough time to recover. Now let's look at this graph that looks at inadequate recovery, so you don't have enough recovery. Again, right down the middle, we have your base level of fitness, which indicates your capacity, what you're able to do today. And if we go from left to right, again, we're looking at time. So now let's look here. We load the body. We get that reduction in capacity. If we look at the amount of recovery here, we see that it is less than the previous graph. And with this amount of recovery, you actually don't get into that green area where you should be with increased capacity, okay? Because you didn't give your body enough time to get stronger. Now, this red line continues downward because this would suggest that the next time you load it, okay, you get a decrease in capacity again because you're below that base level, you didn't get enough recovery time. And it becomes much, much harder to then get into that green area where you would have been if you got that adequate recovery. And what we see in this red area is reduced ability to accept load. So load, again, would be your practices, your games, your tournaments. Your body has a reduced ability to deal with that, to manage that, to recover from that, and to get stronger. And this leads to an increased risk of injury. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the load recovery continuum because this is important. So load is going to bring you towards the right in red, so that's a stressor. And recovery is going to bring you to the left in green. It's what allows your body to adapt, okay? So let's start on the left here. We have acute fatigue. That means, let's say you have a really hard workout. The next day, the day after that, you feel tired, you feel sore. You get this subclinical tissue damage, so a little bit of stress on your muscles and tendons. But if you recover, you go back to normal, okay? Now, if you don't get enough recovery, you get into what's called functional overreaching, okay? So overreaching means that you have an accumulation of training or non-training stress, okay? So remember, physical or mental stressors that result in a short-term decrease in performance or capacity, which you might not see any signs or symptoms of maladaptation. So you might not see any pain, any problems. And if you give yourself time to recover, you can go back to normal. And this might take only a few days to a few weeks. Now, functional overreaching is that point where you're really trying to improve performance. You're getting a really hard training session, you get enough recovery, you get back to normal, you get stronger. Now, if you continue and you do not get enough recovery, okay, this is where we start getting into that bottom half of the red graph, okay? You get non-functional overreaching. This is when your training continues at a high intensity, and the result is really a feeling of stagnation. You kind of feel a little bit dull. You might see a decrease in performance. You kind of feel like you're in a rut. And this typically does not resolve unless you have a few weeks or months of recovery. So you need to decrease the intensity duration of exercise in order to allow your body and your mental state to recover. Generally, what you show in this state is performance decreases, decreases in vigor, you have less energy, you have more fatigue. But if you get enough recovery, you will still be able to recover here. Now, if you try and push through this stage, you continue moving to the right, and this is where you have your overtraining syndrome or overtraining. And this is when you continuously push through those feelings of low energy and the subclinical kind of pain or issues without enough recovery. And you get long-term decreases in performance capacity, and this may take even longer to recover. So now we're not dealing with days or weeks, we're dealing with weeks or months. What we see in this area is the inability for you to sustain intense exercise. You have sport-specific decreases in performance and capacity. You're really not able to do as much, particularly when your training load is maintained or increased. So you really are noticing you can't keep up anymore. So for example, you're probably able to start a normal training session or game, but you're not able to continue the training session or game at that level. And it's usually described as an unexplainable decrease in performance. You might have more feelings of tension, depression, anger, fatigue. So you're really losing that positive mood. And usually when you start to decrease your training, you'll see an improvement in those moods. Now, there are some things that might confuse whether or not you're along the spectrum. These things include not having adequate nutrition. It might be that you might be sick. You might have excess psychosocial stressors, so that might be things like school, your team, your family, maybe work, or you might have a sleep disorder. And so here I've just outlined basically in green, these are things that are helpful. You push yourself enough, but you allow yourself to recover. This year will allow you to improve performance. If you don't recover enough, we start getting into that orange zone called non-functional overreaching, where you start to see some slight changes in mood. But if you continue with a lack of recovery, that's when we get into the red zone with significant changes in mood and poor performance. So again, here we just have this kind of red light, green light situation where in the short term, if you allow yourself adequate recovery, you can increase performance. If you really push yourself to the edge, you might have a temporary decrease in performance, but as long as you get enough recovery, you can go back to normal. If you push through with inadequate recovery, you'll lead with stagnation and a decrease in performance, and if you continue to push, you'll get a decrease in performance. So this is where it becomes really important to understand how you can recover properly. So we're going to touch mainly on sleep today because we have a specific presentation for nutrition, but we will touch on the importance of eating well, eating enough, and hydration, as well as some potential other methods that can help as well. They're just not as good as sleep. So we know that elite athletes, and you guys are the elite athletes, are known to get less sleep than non-athletes. Even if you get the required 8 hours, you might have longer sleep latency, which means it takes you longer to get to sleep, as well as lower sleep efficiency, meaning you have poor quality of sleep than non-athletes, and this results in having lower sleep quantity and lower sleep quality. In addition, as an athlete, you understand the importance of a number of different things. You know it's important to practice your skills, your touches, your passes, your shooting, your gameplay. You know it's important to have a certain amount of fitness, running, strength, but sometimes you don't think it's as important to sleep because it's something that you kind of just do as part of your normal routine. But as we'll see today, it's a very, very important part of your recovery and how you adapt to all of the training that you're doing. When we look at teenagers who chronically sleep poorly, they are more likely to be injured by almost 60% than those who sleep well. So poor chronic sleep behaviors are teenagers that sleep less than 8 hours. Okay, so 8 hours is that cutoff. And when we look at these people, as I mentioned, they're more likely to experience an injury. These negative effects can happen with just 2 to 4 hours less sleep per night. So I really want that to sink in. At least 8 hours of sleep. If you get more than that, that's great. But if you get less than that, you're more likely to be injured than those who don't. So what are some of the negative effects of sleep deprivation or not getting enough sleep? There are a number of different effects. They can be neurocognitive, so from the brain. They can be metabolic, so how your body functions. They can be immunologic, so your immune system, and they can affect your cardiovascular system, so your heart, your blood, and how that pumps blood through your body. So sleep deprivation can lead to impairments in judgment or decision making during athletic performance. So the choices you make during the game and practice can be affected if you have poor sleep. You have slower and less accurate cognitive performance. You have slower reaction times and maybe some confusion. So you react slowly, more slowly. You are less accurate in your decisions, and you have poorer judgment. Sleep deprivation has also been associated with obesity and diabetes. It can lead you to crave unhealthy foods, and it can change how your body works in managing the foods that you're eating. So poor sleep can affect your appetite. It can affect what you're eating, as well as your protein synthesis. Protein synthesis is really important to help you recover from your training and make you stronger. Okay? Poor sleep or sleep deprivation can also have a negative impact on growth hormone and cortisol secretion. This is really important because growth hormone helps you get stronger. It's what makes you grow. And cortisol is what your body secretes in response to stress. And so if it changes these secretions, you're changing how your body is responding to the training as well as to stressors. Sleep deprivation leads to an increase in pro-inflammatory hormones. This is really important because it means that your body's in a state of higher inflammation, and this can have impacts on your immune system. So how your body fights germs, bacteria. It can impede or reduce muscle recovery. So we know that's really important with your training because you want to promote muscle recovery. You want to get stronger after your workouts, and if you have more inflammation in your body, this is slowed down. There is a reduction in damage repair. Again, that has a huge impact on how you're recovering from your training sessions, and maybe it takes you longer to recover and you're sore for more time. Again, the longer it takes for you to recover, the less likely you're going to be in that green area of the graph and more likely in the red area of the graph. Sleep deprivation also changes how you perceive pain. You're more likely to see things as being painful if you're tired all the time. And then specific to sport, you see a decrease in muscle strength. You see a decrease in running distance being able to be covered, longer sprint times, and it takes less time for you to show that you're tired when you're running. So these are things that are specific to sport that are being impaired when you are sleep deprived. You also see a decrease in your mood and vigor, and these are really important because this is how you feel. If you feel bad, you're not going to perform as well, and it's going to also complicate that spectrum that we talked about with overreaching and overtraining. So now let's talk about what happens if you start extending your sleep. We see a return of your hormones to normal, healthy levels. This includes your growth hormone and other hormones that help build your muscles, build your bones, make you stronger. We see an improvement in your cognitive performance. Those are your judgment, your decision times, your reaction times. We see an improvement in those specific sport capacities, so faster sprint times, accuracy, and time to exhaustion, and improvements in those mood components. So you're more alert, you have more energy, you have better moods. Now, this can be improved just by increasing sleep up to 2 hours with a goal of getting 9 to 10 hours of sleep. And napping can be beneficial as long as it's kept to about 20 minutes of napping. We're not talking about those 1.5 hour, 3 hour naps, because that can then interfere with your sleep at night. So sleep hygiene, what are some things that you can do to improve your sleep if you're having issues with that? So you can have a bedtime routine, so things that help you calm down, relax before bed, and going to sleep at the same time every night. You can avoid blue light at least 2 hours before bed. So that's either not watching or not using your devices or getting blue light blocking glasses or software on your computer or phone. You want to keep your bedroom dark at night, and then when you wake up, you want to try and expose yourself to the bright natural light. This helps your body get into its natural rhythm of sleeping and being awake. Only use your bed for sleep. I know a lot of people who are doing homework in bed, reading in bed, hanging out, watching TV in bed. If you only use your bed for sleep, you start to associate your bed with sleep, which helps make that easier when the time comes. Meditation can be helpful. Changing your diet so you're having smaller meals before bed with high carbs and avoiding high fat before bed. Don't fall asleep to the TV, and avoid any stimulants. So this is going to be any caffeine, high sugar, or energy drinks. Okay, so eat well and eat enough. And we're going to talk about this in the nutrition lecture, but really this is to make sure that your body has enough energy to do what you're asking it to do, as well as to recover. So in previous presentations, I've talked to you about carbohydrates. This is really important to give your body energy to perform. So you want to make sure you have enough energy to do your practice. You have enough energy to do your game or to plan your tournament. You want to maintain your protein intake because this will help your muscles recover and become stronger. And you want to stay hydrated so that it reduces the stress on your body. When we start talking about energy, you want to make sure that you're eating enough. And that means that you're in a positive energy balance, which means you're eating more calories than you spend. As a young, developing, or adolescent athlete, that's a lot of calories because you're growing and you're very active. So you want to make sure that you're eating enough to maintain all the activity you're doing. As I mentioned, we'll talk more about that in our nutrition lecture. So a few other things that you can consider. These things have smaller impacts on recovery, and so that's why I don't really talk about them in detail. But some things you can try doing are foam rolling. So this can lead to a short-term increase in flexibility, but can also help with that soreness after a workout. Stretching can help. Again, just light stretching. You don't want to do anything too intense. If you do it too intensely, you might actually be more sore. Okay, so just some light stretching to kind of increase your range of motion and decrease the sensitivity that you have to your soreness. Massage therapy, these are just short massage therapy sessions, so about 20 to 30 minutes right after a training session can help decrease some soreness. Compression garments, so that can be compression socks, compression pants, can help reduce soreness after playing. Again, contrast water therapy, so hot or cold, or just cold, can have a small impact on that soreness after playing. And active recovery, which is just kind of like light stretching, light movements, can have a small impact on fatigue and the feeling of muscle soreness. So, in summary, we know that recovery is important not only to maintain performance, but to reduce injuries and prevent overtraining and burnout. If you have appropriate recovery, it allows your body to adapt to the load of training and competition, so that's physical and mental stresses, and then makes you stronger. Okay, it increases your capacity. As part of your recovery strategies, sleeping enough is key, and we're talking 8 to 10 hours, and trying to follow some of those sleep hygiene points so that you get good sleep. Napping is okay if you need it, but you should keep it to 20 minutes. Eat well and eat enough, so getting your carbohydrates and protein to make sure that the gas in the tank is there when you need to go to your practice, you need to go to your competition or your game. You have enough gas in the tank to get you through that activity. And you can use things like foam rolling, stretching, compression, hot and cold, or icing or cold therapy to help reduce the feeling of fatigue, so the feeling you might have after training when your legs are super tired, or that feeling of muscle soreness after a workout or a training session. So that's all I have for today's presentation on recovery. If you have any more questions or you want more information, you can get in touch with me, my email, Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, okay? And I'd be happy to help you get more information. So the balance between external load and tissue capacity does play a significant and important role in injuries. And so we know that in sports, injuries can be caused by a number of different things, but in particular here we're talking about those chronic overuse injuries. And so load management is a major risk factor for injury in these cases. So when we start talking about external load, we're talking about your training, your games, your tournaments. And when we talk about tissue capacity, we're talking about that base level. What are you able to do? What is your fitness level? How strong are you? How able are you to run and keep going? And what stress does that pose on your body? So at a tissue level, when we look at your muscles and tendons, your load may lead to micro damage, and if you don't have enough recovery from that, over time this can lead to the addition of this micro damage to the tissue, and it can lead to exceeding or going above the load-bearing capacity of a tissue. Basically, you're saying all these tiny little injuries that you don't feel, over time they add up, and it can then lead to an injury. This can lead to injuries like stress fractures, tendinopathies, or knee pain. And the main factor here is really to have enough recovery to allow your body to get stronger. Inappropriate loading can be caused by things like with fatigue, there are changes in decision-making ability, coordination, and body control, and these can lead to greater stresses being placed on the muscles and tendons. Fatigue from training and competition can lead to decrease in your muscular force production, as well as how fast you can contract. So these are things that can directly affect performance. You're not as strong, you're not as fast, but this can also lead to more stresses on the tissues of the body, and this can lead to faster breakdown. The other thing to consider, and this is more from a coach's standpoint, is when you have a very big increase in training or playing over a week, this can lead to too great of a stress on the body, and this can lead to an increased risk of injury. And so as part of these scheduling issues is really calendar congestion. That's where I talked about having a large number of games within a week or a number of tournaments back to back, and this can severely impact the recovery of the players.